I'm really dating myself here, but I think many of you may recall Jack Benny, whose shtick revolved around him being a tightwad. In one of his skits, he's approached by an armed robber. Your money or your life. There is a long pause. Jack does nothing. Finally, the robber impatiently asks, well? Jack replied, don't rush me. I'm thinking it over. Money. All of us are understandably concerned for one reason or another about money. Jesus knew that. It was no different 2,000 years ago. That is why he had so much to say on the subject. In the first 3 Gospels, 1 out of every 6 verses deals with the use or abuse of money. 16 of the 34 parables that Jesus told deal specifically with money. There are over 500 verses in the Bible that deal with prayer, but over 2,500 verses that deal with money. No question. Throughout the ages, money is an important part of life. But will we control our money, or will it control us? Will money be a blessing to us or a curse? Jesus speaks to those questions in this morning's gospel about a rich man whose land brought forth so much grain that he didn't know what to do with the surplus. Nice problem to have, right? The rich man decided to resolve that problem by pulling down his barns and building bigger ones to store all of his grain and goods. Thinking to himself, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. Well, we all know how well that worked out for him. That very night, God came to him and called him a fool, saying, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? Then Jesus adds, so it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God. Note that Jesus doesn't call the rich man a sinner, but a fool. Jesus doesn't condemn wealth or say that it's wrong to have nice things. He just says, don't trust it. Don't believe in it. Trust God. Put your faith in God. Be rich toward God. Then use your wealth to do some good. Do some good for yourself. Take care of your needs, of course, but also be a good steward of the abundance that God entrusts to us, and be rich toward God. The plain fact is that a lot of the time our soul's concern is about being rich, at least in terms of being financially secure in these very uncertain economic times. We have responsibilities and worry about paying the mortgage and all the other day-to-day expenses. We worry about our future, our retirement, paying college tuition for the kids. Do we have enough? And what is enough? But the problem is, for those of us blessed enough to have some money set aside, the richer our bank account, the more we have in our 401ks, the less we feel our dependence upon God. It may be that the biggest spiritual problem we have is our reliance on our possessions. Our possessions can be assets, but they can also be spiritual liabilities. What is enough? In a Peanuts cartoon, Charlie Brown and Linus were reflecting on the day, and Charlie Brown said to Linus, we had a wonderful day today, didn't we? Did I make you happy? Linus replied, I think I'm about 1 cookie away from being happy. John D. Rockefeller would have agreed. When he was asked how much wealth does it take to satisfy a person, he replied, just a little bit more. Jesus pulls no punches here when he points out that all of us at the end of our journey here on earth will end up empty-handed anyway, and that the bottom line is the only wealth that will matter is whether we are rich toward God. Jesus called this rich man a fool not because he had full barns, but because he had an empty heart. He was rich in man's eyes, but he was poor in God's eyes. The rich man had a deep-seated poverty that he was totally ignorant about. His heart was empty. It was his wealth that fooled him into thinking that he could place his trust in his riches, rather than placing his trust in God. Notice that the rich man never considers other ways to solve his storage problem. One way he could have solved this problem of overabundance would have been to share some of it with those less fortunate, rather than building bigger barns. About a year ago, CBS 60 Minutes ran a story about Bill Gates, another mega-rich man, with surpluses beyond measure. After creating and leading Microsoft for many years, Gates had amassed a fortune of over $67 billion. Several years ago, he stepped down from the company, and he is now devoting his life and his billions to eradicating polio, tuberculosis, and malaria, which kills millions of children under 5 every year. That's one every 20 seconds. And improving the lives of 1/3 of the world's population, what he calls the bottom 2 billion people. These people struggle to live on $2 a day. They are poor, hungry, lack electricity and clean water, while Bill Gates' barns are full beyond any measure. So is his heart. Although we are not rich in the way that Bill Gates is, compared to the bottom 2 billion, we are rich indeed. To put it in more concrete terms, noted economist Robert Heilbroner created a little mental exercise that will give us an idea of how daily life is for the bottom 2 billion people in the world. First, take out all the furniture in your home except for one table and a couple of chairs. Use a blanket and pads for beds. Take away all of your clothing except for your oldest dress or suit, shirt or blouse. Keep only one pair of shoes. Empty the pantry and the refrigerator except for a small bag of flour, some sugar and salt, a few potatoes, some onions, and a dish of dried beans. Dismantle the bathroom, shut off the running water, and remove all the electrical wiring in your house. Take away the house itself and move the family into the tool shed. Place your tool shed house in a shantytown. Cancel all subscriptions to newspapers, magazines, and book clubs. This is no great loss because none of us can read anyway. Leave only one radio for the entire shanty town. Move the nearest hospital or clinic 10 miles away and put a midwife in charge instead of the doctor. Throw away your bank books, stock certificates, pension plans, and insurance policies. Leave the family a cash hoard of $10. Give the head of the family a few acres to cultivate, on which he can raise a few $100s of cash crops each year, of which 1/3 will go to the landlord and 1/10 to the moneylenders. Lastly, take off 25 or more years of your life expectancy. By comparison, how rich we are. And with our wealth comes responsibility. We should use it wisely, and as much as we are able, help others. It's clear from the Bible that Jesus is not telling us to sell everything we have and give it to the poor. Jesus called only a few people to that kind of radical commitment. But we need to take his teaching seriously. And while, unlike Bill Gates, we don't have $67 billion in the bank, generosity is not a state of the pocketbook, but a state of the soul. I think everyone here knows I walk a lot. Judging by all the comments I get from total strangers, I think everybody within a 10 or 20 mile radius knows I walk a lot. And with all the walking I do, I quickly get overheated, so I never used to wear a jacket or a coat. In the winter, I would just wear as many layers as I needed. Flannel shirts, turtleneck, thermal underwear, and a crew neck sweatshirt. But my outermost layer was always my favorite hooded and quilted sweatshirt that just fit me like a glove and was so warm. I wore it all the time. But after a couple of years, I wore holes in the elbows because of the constant friction. But I continued to wear it because it fit me so well and so warm, and I never have found one like it. One particularly cold winter day, I caught an early train to go visit my dad, and I was wearing 6 or 7 layers. When I got to Penn Station, I stopped in the ladies' room and was washing my hands when an old homeless woman parked her metal shopping cart right next to the wall by me and very quietly got close to me, leaned in, and whispered gently in my ear, "You can get a really good hot meal in a church 2 blocks away." My immediate reaction was I was mortified. But instantly, that was replaced by a feeling of such overwhelming gratitude. I was so touched by that woman's kindness. Here she was in the midst of her daily struggle on a very cold day, and took the time to give me the one gift she could, that of where I could get a good hot meal to sustain me through the day. Although the very first thing I did when I got home was throw out that sweatshirt, I was and always will be humbled and so grateful for that amazing gift. Generosity is not a state of the pocketbook, but a state of the soul. A man named John Jackson, who is an advocate for the poor in Orlando, Florida, tells of an event that happened one day outside a food distribution center where he was working. Jackson describes the event. The line was long that day, but moving quickly. And in that line, at the very end of the line, stood a young girl who appeared to be about 12 years old. She waited patiently as those at the front of the line received a little rice, some canned goods, maybe a couple of pieces of fruit. Slowly but surely, she was getting closer to the front of the line, closer to the food. From time to time, she would glance across the street. She didn't seem to notice the growing concern on the faces of the people who were distributing the food. There wasn't going to be enough. The food was rapidly running out. Their anxiety began to show, but still the girl didn't notice. Her attention seemed always to focus on 3 figures huddled together under a tree across the street. At last she stepped forward to get her food. But the only thing left was one lonely banana. The workers were almost ashamed to tell her that was all that was left. But she didn't seem to mind. In fact, she seemed genuinely happy to get that solitary banana. Quietly, she took the precious gift and ran across the street where 3 small children waited. Maybe they were her siblings, maybe not. Very deliberately, the girl peeled the banana. Then she carefully divided the banana into 3 equal parts and placed the precious food in the eager hands of those young ones. One for you, one for you, and one for you. Then, for her own meal, she licked the inside of that banana peel. Jackson ends the story, and I will always believe that I saw the face of God that day. Generosity is not a state of the pocketbook, but a state of the soul. There's one other key message in this parable that I want to talk briefly about. The story's sense of urgency. Time marches on. The days and years tick by. There are certain things that ought to be done before our time here on earth runs out. There was a man, only 29 years old, an attorney, married with 3 children, all under 5 years old. One day, he woke up with a headache. As the day wore on, it got worse. Then he had difficulty seeing. Then he had difficulty walking. He went to the doctor and was told, "You have a brain tumor that will require delicate surgery right away. If you survive the surgery, then there will be a critical time of recovery for about a year. If you survive that, then with each passing year, you can be assured of a full recovery." He made it through the surgery. He made it through that first year. Then he was interviewed by the local TV news. A reporter asked him, "Have you learned anything from this?" He said, "Yes. Your life is on loan. Heaven is at the end of a heartbeat, and eternity is but one breath away." No one can really say, "Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry." The end of the road of life is reached too suddenly, too unexpectedly for many of us. This night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? We all need a piece of the rock, as the old Prudential Insurance Company commercials used to say. True enough. But our rock is Jesus Christ, not an insurance policy created by a man-made financial institution. It is for us to lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. It is all right to make investments as long as we understand that our lives do not consist of what we can earn and accumulate, or in the abundance of possessions we own. Our worth is never determined by our wealth, but in a living and enduring relationship with God. The only future that is sure is God's future. God will be with us, whether the stock market rebounds or whether the bottom falls out completely. God will be with us. When we know that we are God's and He is ours, then and only then can we know what real and lasting security is. The 29-year-old attorney was a man who woke up and saw that his life is on loan, and that we are just stewards here. For a person's life does not consist in the abundance of their possessions, but in what they do with them, and that it is not how much of my possessions I use for God, but how much of God's possessions I keep for myself. Amen.